Level 1. The recruit. Nobody greets you when you arrive. There's no orientation speech, no welcome packet, no handshake from someone who cares whether you make it. You're handed a number and pointed toward a field. The instructors are already sorting the group into columns you can't see from where you're standing. They've done this long enough to read a person's ceiling before that person has taken a single step. The washout rate is 70%. They announce this on day 1 with the same energy a pilot uses to announce cruising altitude. Informational, neutral. 7 out of every 10 people standing in that field will not complete the program. Some will decide to leave. Some will be removed. Some will unravel so gradually that neither they nor anyone around them will notice until it's already done. The first week doesn't touch a rifle. Not once. Instead, you learn to move across open ground without being seen. You crawl on your stomach through fields while instructors scan with binoculars from elevated positions. And if a lens catches your silhouette, you return to the start line and go again. You construct a ghillie suit from raw burlap and whatever vegetation exists in the immediate environment, building a second skin that makes you indistinguishable from the terrain around you. You learn that covering 10 meters can take an hour when the situation demands it. You learn that waiting is not passive. Waiting, when done with discipline, is its own form of aggression. The first thing this place teaches you is that the sniper's most lethal attribute has nothing to do with the trigger. Candidates fall away throughout the weeks. One quits after a cold night exercise strips him of the certainty that brought him here. 2 are removed after range safety violations. 1 is simply absent at morning formation, his bunk cleared out, his gear collected, his departure a decision made in the hours before sunrise when nobody was watching. You feel nothing about their absence except a private note that their spot is no longer occupied. You stay. Not because you're outperforming anyone. You stay because the thought of withdrawing produces something in your chest that feels worse than any physical discomfort the course can generate. Every failed stalk, every hour of stillness while insects treat your motionless face as landscape, every repetition that starts over because the standard wasn't met, you absorb and continue. Shooting arrives later than you expected, and it humbles you immediately. You came here with a background in hunting, comfortable with bolt actions, confident at ranges that impress people who haven't done this seriously. None of that prepares you for what precision at 1,000 yards actually requires. The wind doesn't push a bullet. It negotiates with it, redirecting it through invisible corridors of shifting pressure and temperature that change faster than any single calculation can account for. Gravity doesn't simply drop the round. It pulls it through a curve that requires arithmetic you're still learning to perform under stress. Everything you thought you knew turns out to be an introduction to the subject. The final evaluation runs 4 days without meaningful rest. Stalks under live observation, scored shots under time pressure, decision-making while your body is running on residual energy and the memory of sleep. Somewhere around hour 60, your mind stops generating noise and begins producing only the next immediate task. Nothing beyond that. Some candidates perform cleanly through the entire evolution until something internal reaches its limit and gives way all at once. They're pulled immediately. Not disciplined. Simply identified as incompatible with what the work demands long-term. You discover something about yourself during those 4 days that no previous experience had surfaced. Under genuine pressure, your cognition doesn't accelerate into chaos. It narrows, simplifies. The more compressed the situation becomes, the more clearly you're able to see what it requires. You don't know if this is a virtue or just a neurological accident. Either way, it keeps you functional when others are coming apart. You graduate ranked in the lower third. Adequate. Not a story anyone will tell. You receive your orders and join a team that needs a warm body in a specific role. And you ship out. Level 2. The spotter. Reyes has been doing this longer than you've been eligible to enlist. 4 deployments, a set of eyes that always seem to be focused on something slightly behind the present moment, and a physical vocabulary of small behaviors that only become readable once you've logged enough hours around him. The pause before entering any room. The instinct to position himself with walls at his back in restaurants. Sightlines open to every entrance. The sounds that come through thin barracks walls after midnight that he never acknowledges in daylight and nobody asks about. Spotting means you are the shooter's cognition. He manages the shot. You manage everything that makes the shot possible. Wind speed, wind direction, distance to target, target confirmation, documentation of outcomes. You process external data continuously so that his entire mental bandwidth can remain on trigger discipline, breath control, and the accumulated muscle memory that makes precision repeatable rather than occasional. The deployment is to a location with no official American presence. The rules of engagement are dense and revised frequently. The people you're looking for don't wear identifying clothing. They look like everyone else in the environment until a specific moment when they don't, and learning to recognize that transition before it completes is its own curriculum. Your first contribution to a kill is a man with an RPG, spotted approaching a position that overlooks a convoy route. Reyes fires from 800 meters. You called the wind. You confirmed the identification. You watched through the scope as the round connected before the report reached the target's location. The man dropped. The weapon hit the rooftop and stayed there, unfired. You had constructed an expectation in advance of this moment. Something significant was supposed to happen internally. Some emotional marker that would confirm the gravity of what you'd participated in. What actually occurs is closer to the feeling that follows a task completed without error. Professional. Clean. You store the visual details somewhere organized and shift your attention forward. Reyes observes you afterward with an evaluation that has nothing to do with fieldcraft. He's seen spotters disintegrate at this exact point, the moment where training becomes irreversible action. He doesn't find what he's looking for in your face. Whether that reassures him or concerns him, you never determine. The deployment teaches you things that exist in no formal curriculum. Morning thermals behave differently from afternoon thermals over the same terrain, and the difference matters at distance. The ideal firing position rarely exists exactly where you need it, and improvisation is a skill that requires its own development. Withdrawal without a shot, when the conditions don't support success, requires more discipline than taking the shot would. Patience accumulates value faster than aggression in this work. You learn Reyes the way you'd learn a language. His rhythms, the specific inhale that means he's acquiring, the longer exhale that means he's decided to wait, the exact weight of silence that means he wants input versus the different weight that means he wants none. You become an extension of his decision-making process, which is the full definition of the role. Level 3. The shooter. Reyes goes home after deployment 5. The position he accepts is nominally a training role, but within the unit, the understanding is more honest. The drinking has become visible enough to require management, and whatever the marriage once was has already reached its conclusion. You attend the farewell with a combination of emotions that don't resolve cleanly into any single thing. Relief that he's stepping back before something worse happens. Grief for the version of him that existed before the accumulated weight of all those years. His replacement is younger than you and technically outranks you. In a conventional structure, this would establish the hierarchy clearly. In a small unit operating without close oversight, experience reorganizes the arrangement without anyone stating it directly. You're the primary shooter because the team needs that from you, and rank bends toward operational necessity. Your first shot as primary is almost boring. Confirmed target, 600 meters, minimal wind, textbook conditions. The training executes itself. The result is exactly what the training produces. You move on. The shot that actually tests you comes weeks later. 3 American civilians, aid workers, have been held for 2 weeks in a compound positioned at the bottom of a valley. The intelligence on their location is solid, cross-referenced across multiple sources within a narrow time window. One execution video has already been produced and distributed. The window for a viable rescue operation is closing. You establish a position 1,400 meters from the compound wall. Farther than any shot you've taken in a live operational environment. The valley's thermal activity creates wind conditions that shift direction unpredictably every few minutes, and your spotter's calls reflect physics that refuses to stabilize into anything reliable. He's giving you his best estimate. His best estimate keeps changing. You wait through most of the daylight hours. You watch the guards cycle through their rotations and memorize the timing. You see the hostages through a window briefly, faces you recognize from pre-mission briefing materials. Alive. The calculation that follows is automatic and unpleasant. Alive for now, with a trajectory that doesn't point toward continued survival. The shot window opens at last light. The guard you need crosses a specific point and pauses for a duration measured in low single-digit seconds. You apply a correction that combines what the math suggests with something that doesn't have a precise name, some integration of pattern recognition and accumulated experience that operates faster than conscious thought. The shot breaks. The round tracks correctly. The assault element moves. 20 minutes later, the hostages are airborne and you're collapsing your position in darkness. 3 people. That's what the shot produced. You carry that differently than the others. Not heavier exactly, just differently shaped. Level 4. The instructor. The school looks smaller than memory stored it. You occupy the position you once studied from the opposite direction, now reading candidates the way Reyes once read you. The institution operates on a logic that outlasts any individual who passes through it. People arrive. The ones suited to continue do. The ones who aren't get filtered, and the cycle produces something more consistent than any individual could generate alone. Standing on the instructor's side of the evaluation reveals something unexpected. You believed you understood the techniques. Explaining them forces a deeper excavation. The reason behind each rule, the physical principle beneath each procedure. Teaching sharpens the practitioner in ways that only practicing alone cannot. The candidates fail in patterns. Trigger control breaks down under observation. Breath management dissolves when the stakes feel real. The mental architecture required to remain motionless for hours and then execute with precision in the following seconds is not something most people possess and cannot be installed through repetition alone. You develop an eye for the ones who will persist. Physical strength is irrelevant as a predictor. Natural talent is a weak signal. The reliable indicator is how a person treats a failure. Data to adjust from, or verdict to collapse under. Those two responses sort the population cleanly. Your reputation forms around specificity. You criticize precisely, identifying the actual deficiency rather than expressing general dissatisfaction. Your standards don't flex. Graduates from your training cycles perform measurably better in early deployments than the broader baseline. That metric is the only evaluation of your teaching that carries any weight. What teaching costs you is the edge, not technical sharpness, that you maintain on the range without difficulty. Something harder to quantify. The operational readiness that combat produces exists at a different altitude than the readiness that training sustains. The violence you're preparing others for has become theoretical in your own experience, and you feel the distance. When a deployment slot opens, you don't deliberate. Level 5. The team leader. The unit you return to is populated by people who reference things you've never heard of, use equipment that postdates your early career, and relate to the work through frameworks that developed after your formation. They call you old man with affection that carries genuine warmth, which almost makes the word accurate. Your body has begun keeping records. Knees that anticipate rain. A lower back that annotates every hour spent in a hide position. Recovery timelines that have quietly expanded. Leadership at this level operates through accumulated pattern recognition rather than positional authority. You've seen enough iterations of the same situations to know which solutions work and which solutions feel like they should work but don't. That knowledge is what the team actually needs from you, and rank is mostly just the formal wrapper around it. The 1,700-meter shot becomes the thing people inside the unit discuss when discussing you. The conditions were genuine, not constructed for demonstration. Variable wind, a compromised angle, time pressure that foreclosed preparation. The target was transitioning between vehicles in a pattern that produced a window you could measure in single-digit seconds. You made the shot because losing the target was not an acceptable outcome. The story improves with each retelling in ways you don't correct, because the team's confidence in itself has operational value. What you hold privately is an accurate accounting of what went right through fortunate physics. The wind cooperated at the precise moment it was most needed. That cooperation was not something you produced. The shot you think about more is never discussed. The intelligence was wrong. Your shot was technically correct in every measurable dimension. The man you hit was a civilian who was somewhere he shouldn't have been, doing something that read as threatening from the available information, which turned out not to be what was actually occurring. The review process cleared you by every applicable standard. The report used language designed to contain the event within manageable categories. The face doesn't use that language. For months, your sleep is inconsistent in ways that don't respond to standard remedies. The face appears in the specific quality of silence that exists just before full waking. You develop a functional relationship with this over time, not because the weight diminishes, but because you understand that the alternative is its own kind of damage. Soldiers who carry nothing have not found peace. They have lost something that was keeping them oriented toward what matters. The discomfort is evidence that the internal compass is still functioning. Level 6. The Master. The designation is never official. It accumulates through repeated acknowledgement from people who have comparable experience and are therefore qualified to make the assessment. What it actually marks is duration and survival, the compound rarity of someone who has operated at this level long enough to see multiple generations of practitioners come through and either continue or not. You're assigned to evaluate emerging technologies alongside your operational rotation. Optics that process atmospheric data and produce corrected firing solutions automatically. Suppressor systems engineered with new materials. Rifles built around tolerances that previous manufacturing couldn't hold. The engineers who developed these systems are brilliant and share a consistent blind spot. They design toward the elimination of human variability, operating under the assumption that human variability is the primary source of failure. What they consistently underweight is that human variability is also the source of every judgment call that saved a situation the algorithm hadn't modeled. Remove the human element fully, and you gain consistency at the cost of adaptability. More critically, you remove the moral friction that bounds what the system will and won't do. That friction is not a defect. Your final deployment arrives, and you know it before it begins. The certainty sits in the background of everything and changes your relationship to the details. You find yourself registering things that operational focus would previously have filtered. The specific light quality at a particular hour in a particular landscape. The rhythm of a patrol rotation that has no tactical significance beyond its own pattern. You're documenting experience in real time because some part of you has already begun the process of ending. The last shot is a routine engagement. Confirmed target, reasonable distance, cooperative conditions. Professional execution. You don't recognize it as the last one until you're seated on the transport watching the ground recede below. The recognition arrives complete rather than gradually. You will not do this again. 22 years. A number of operations you stopped tracking because the tracking had begun to feel like the wrong relationship with the work. You leave behind techniques that are now curriculum, approaches to problems that carry no attribution. The people you trained are training others, and the lineage continues without requiring your continued presence. What returns with you cannot be processed through standard channels. The involuntary associations, the specific smells that arrive without invitation and carry visual content behind them. The hypervigilance that was precision equipment in one environment and produces only friction in another. The social connections that couldn't maintain themselves across the distance the work required, not geographic distance, but the kind that accumulates when a person is continuously required to become something their relationships were not built to accommodate. Alongside that, carried with equal weight, the precise knowledge of people who reach their destinations, who open their doors, who are conducting the ordinary business of their lives because a specific convergence of skill and circumstance and split-second physics produced the outcome it needed to produce. The accounting doesn't simplify into something clean. It was never meant to. The rifle goes into a case. The case goes into a closet. The closet mostly stays closed. Some nights the dreams revisit the shots that didn't happen. The held breath, the moving target, the window that closed before the decision fully formed. You follow those threads sometimes, wondering about the timeline that branched at that moment of hesitation, what those continued lives produced in the years following, whether the restraint was correct or simply cautious. The answer is unavailable. That's always been the nature of the work. One breath, one shot. Hold the discipline until there's nothing left to hold it for.
I appreciate you watching until the very end. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and hitting the like button. It really helps out a growing channel like mine. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.